Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is 6:07 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, November 6, 2020, just a couple of days after the hotly contested election.
Oh, yeah.
And we're here today with a follow-up interview with Mr. Michael Baxter.
Howdy, everybody.
Brian, how are you doing today?
Today's okay. Now that we've switched our timing now, instead of having that additional little bit of time where I'm at, where I can throw on some trunks and get to the beach to watch the sunset and catch a couple of waves. Now it's just, the Iron Curtain closes down at 5 o'clock, and
right.
I think we all scrabble home to our domiciles to await the morn.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're in daylight savings time.
Oh, the dreaded one.
Tell me, Brian, what's the update on the election?
The election.
Yeah, I haven't been following it today.
I'm trying not to pay attention because my whole thing on it is let's not all get wound up over something that's been telegraphed, right?
Yeah.
If you haven't been aware, they've been pretty much discussing all of this stuff for the last few months, and so in that context, we know what's going to happen. It's going to probably go to the courts, and all of this pontification by the media pundits, and especially the polling folks who are, I kind of echo the call. I say, learn to code, my friend. Learn to code, Mr. Pollster, because the age of polling itself and the age of the media talking heads that can hopefully, in their opinion, Mockingbird style, motivate us to do what they want. I think that's coming to an end.
Interesting.
So that, I think, regardless of whoever wins, I think that there are more folks that are awake now than before. I think that Biden fundamentally is completely flawed, even if he does win. Because if we have the Republicans hold the Senate and they have any sort of sway, then they're going to have investigations. It's going to look a lot like the other 4 years.
Okay.
So ultimately, I think if he doesn't win, it's his fault. With all the proof that's right there in front of our faces, if we can't make that happen and make the public understand the fraud that it was, then that's our fault. Ultimately, we get what we voted for.
Well, I'm glad you told me or didn't tell me that Biden had won, because I'm reading. I was just kind of glancing at some publications, and they are declaring victory for Biden, but it's still up in the air. So there's some hope here. But
let's hope that the Republic isn't the ultimate loser.
It could be, and I think this is a real slap in the face to the American public, whatever your politics might be, whatever party you belong to, your affiliation.
Yeah.
In order to distract myself from all the controversy, I was watching this DVD that I just got today, and it's called Melodrama. It's called the Mellotron.
Oh yeah.
Movie. Have you seen this documentary?
I have not, but I'm familiar with the Mellotron itself. I had a little mini Mellotron one time that was very cool. You could just tap out some tunes on there. But those are awesome, like Moogs and Mellotrons and.
Yeah, and I mean, I didn't plan this, but just earlier today, I got the first I've never heard it before. I never had it. I've heard it, but I got the CD of the very first Lynyrd Skynyrd album. And Free Bird is the first track, and it has a Mellotron on it. I didn't realize. I'll have to go back and listen to it. And
yeah, there's so many cool with like the Rhodes electric pianos, and when you go back and you listen to those classic tracks, you realize what made them, so cool, and things like the Leslie cabinets, where you have the old organ cabinets that they would use later on, bands like Deep Purple, and you can hear the spinning speaker inside of it just going over and over, and that's what makes that wonderful sound. And a lot of people don't, until you isolate that and explain it to them and have them listen to it, they go, that's what that sound is. It's marvelous the way that.
Well, I'm glad all this scholarship and documentaries coming out. I just got volume 3 of Recording the Beatles. I plan to get all 5 volumes. And I'll tell you why I'm doing this. And this leads into your world, which is the world of music to a large extent. I know you're involved in a number of activities. Oh, by the way, there's also a track done by Black Sabbath that uses mellotron. I can't
Okay.
remember the tune, but Tony
Yeah, you think of
Iommi
that all
comes
the
on
time.
frequently. He does a voiceover. He doesn't really come on there, but he's talking about how they went to Australia, touting, "Oh, we're going to do the mellotron. It's so spooky and dark and gothic," but it didn't work because it's very temperamental, right?
Well, yeah, those old pieces of equipment were a little temperamental, especially drag them around, and the electronics were not quite as stable and dependable as they are now.
Mm-hmm.
And with my Black Sabbath tribute band, we're always running up against that where we're really trying to cover it and do it justice. But then if it's got a keyboard player in there that they probably brought in the studio, they might not have done it live, maybe they did. For us, it's impossible to do. So we find little ways around that. I'll whistle to it, or we'll have one of the guitar players try to duplicate that sound, drop down an octave, something like that. So yeah, once you throw those curveballs in there, it becomes interesting.
Now, the reason I'm interested in this, and perhaps you could shed some light on it before we get into the main topic here, is that just keep this in the back of your mind here, because I want to consult a professional musician here. Is there a MIDI plug back there?
I was looking back there. I'm like, I'll keep it in the back of my mind, no problem.
All right, musical interface, digital interface. But what's really been rankling me for, it's about almost 10 years now, close to a decade, is that this whole idea that all this music was a giant CIA/MI6 psyop.
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard that.
Is all this work that's coming out here shows that for every musician out there, there supposedly was a mind-controlled zombie by the Tavistock Institute.
They all had handlers, right?
Yeah, they had all the handlers. I mean, there were literally thousands of technicians and inventors and sound people and engineers and tape.
They were all in on it, right? It's a huge worldwide global conspiracy, of course.
And the reason I mention this, because our side supposedly must be on guard for committing the same type of errors that the other side is guilty of.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Just this over the top, I don't know, fanaticism, I guess is one way of calling it.
Sure. It is. There's lots of different kinds of cults, aren't there?
Right? Yeah.
Political and spiritual.
You alluded to Frank Zappa last time, and there's a guy, Dave McGowan, is, I think, he's not the genesis of it. He's the plagiarist of it, because the genesis is a guy named Coleman. He was supposedly MI6, and it's the whole Laurel Canyon deal. Everybody there was somehow connected to CIA. But anyway, you wanted to talk about some dark issues, perhaps. Maybe they're enlightening. You wanted to go into the world of dreams, which is right up the mellotron alley. Isn't that a dreamlike instrument?
It is very dreamy. And just to take one step back into your Tavistock statement there, what I really think happened, and look, I'm not discounting all of the scholars and all the people that have written these books and done the research. But here's my thing. I think, okay, somebody tries to float that initiative from MI6, and they say, oh, CIA is in on it. And we've got these really great ideas on how to affect society using music and to degrade the social structure, because we're really sick and tired of this nuclear family thing. Got to get rid of that, or else America will just be too prosperous. We'll never leave it to Beaver. We'll just take over the world. And we'd rather have communism than leave it to Beaver. So they launched this initiative. And perhaps they had some successes, perhaps they didn't. But what they did is they triggered something. And I don't think they didn't. It's like some of these new initiatives that come out from the government, it has no bite. It's a dog that barks but has no bite, because they don't really have the manpower to enforce. So if you're going to start something from the Tavistock to affect civilization and society using music, but you don't have the adequate structure and bureaucracy to properly administrate that, then things leak out, right? And it leaked out into the wild like a disease. And that music became wild. it became feral, and it festered in different pockets and different cavities like butter in an English muffin. And it was uncontrollable at that point. And sure, they probably floated some bands out there that you would know and you would understand, oh my God, those hits were actually CIA mind control experimental songs. Sure. But I would like to think that the predominance of the classic music that we know and understand, and a lot of the new music too, can't all be controlled. There's always going to be an underground, a basement rock band, a garage band. They're doing their own thing. The punk rock scene, it was too big for them to control, and therefore they lost control of it. They still try, and you can see the markings and the taggings of that, very like Jonas Brothers, and we can see the Disney factory churning these kids out and spitting them out when they're done, and they're horribly traumatized. And somehow they're still able to convince another generation of moms and dads to keep going to Disneyland and all this crap they're pushing. So there's my 2 cents on that. They started it perhaps, but they could not control it ultimately. It was too wild.
Well, this fits in with the whole looming Biden, Harris, or whoever else is behind them, takeover.
Yep.
And that is the culture, as human beings themselves are, is irrepressible. There's always going to be an underground culture. There's always going to be a punk movement, which was organic. And of course, later on it's hijacked. There's going to be a hip hop, which started organically and then gets co-opted. So I'm just putting this out here because otherwise our side, or the people who are trying to combat this oppressive system, can slip into resignation, depression, right? Or surrender. They might just say, well, I'm going to join cult A, B, or C. But you don't need to despair, because we've seen over and over, just as you explained, over and over again, how people have managed to slip the yoke. And it's always the artist.
When the dictator, the harder they squeeze, man, the more the sand runs through their fist, and ultimately they're left with very little to actually control in the end, right? Just puppets and minions, right? And that's not quality. That's not real people. Ultimately, the real people were the grains of sand that were able to escape the grasp and go somewhere else, right? Do their own thing. And I'm hoping that's what we can do. Maybe you and me have, and people like McDuff, the musicians and the people that love music and know how to use music like musical shamans, and mount some sort of harmonic defiance. And especially as they're kicking off McDuff, and they're trying so hard, like I said, the dictator is squeezing and the sand is just escaping out of the cracks. And Neighborhood News Hour is going to find somewhere else to blossom. They're just making it worse for themselves by making it so obvious to people what they're up to. They're going to wake up more people than they understand.
There are hundreds of thousands.
Musical patriots unite.
Do you hear the mellotron?
Look of sound. I hear it. Is it here? Is it there? It's everywhere. The sound of the mellotron.
I gotta confess, I didn't plan this. I had it on I was watching this, and then I was listening to Freebird, and I said, in the Black Sabbath tribute band, and I see the citation there, and I have the software on my computer. It's a mellotron.
We can do this.
It's a mellotron. It's got all these phrases, and I can hook them all together. Yeah. So to your point, it's right there.
Everything's at our fingertips, and the citizen, journalists that are budding right now, and people like myself, and thank you once again for allowing me access to this platform and your budding channel, which I was very excited to hear you discussing, on the trio last Thursday.
Yeah.
I said, okay, wow, this is something.
And
look back on our humble conversation that we started with, and now here we are post-election, and we're discussing, fixing our bayonets on, and getting ready to pop our heads up over the trench possibly, and take on something that.
And I'll be
needs to be done.
Together some original material with about Aldous Huxley.
I could add musically. I'll do that music. I'm not going to do that. Just no bayonets. I don't have any bayonets. Okay. Everybody.
Yeah, no.
I'll sling my guitar over my back and ride into town.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be done with frequencies and vibrations, but
Sure.
yeah, I'll be just a preview for the audience here. I'll be originating some, taking it forward, because I think another problem is I diagnosed the earlier problem of that's this conspiracism on our side that's
Yeah.
debilitating, and I think it's a psyops in truth. But the other problem is that the indie media is becoming an echo chamber as well. So you have all these people who are repeating other indie stuff that goes back 50, 60, 70 years. How
Sure.
many more times do we have to hear about the Rothschilds or the
Mm.
Illuminati or the
Yeah.
Freemasons? I mean, there's always new material there, but it's just a whole rehash. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's allowed, that part is allowed to
Sure.
perpetuate. So I'm going to try to
Sure.
start breaking that cycle. Any artist or musician or thinker doesn't want to go over old ground again, right? I mean, there's a place for that when you're learning a craft, but the idea,
Sure.
just like you've done the tribute band, but now you're doing Baxter music,
Yeah.
the
Oh yeah.
Baxter. Yeah.
Once again, like I said,
Yes. And
sling the guitar with the back, ride right into town, and handle
we'll
some
talk
business
about
with the
your
banditos.
solo career, but first of all, let me hear about the dream part of it, because
Oh, the
doesn't that
dream.
always precede the reality? The dream precedes.
Well, yeah, sometimes that's forecasting, mentally, subliminally. You're receiving messages when you sleep, and God, I wish I remembered more. But I think the ones that we really remember are able to get up and write down and digest and really think about are the more powerful ones. And I know I had a dream a few years ago in which I envisioned freedom from the food marketeers and the food oligarchs, if you will. And I thought about, well, how about we all have aquaponic systems in our backyard? It doesn't matter how big your backyard is. If you could figure out a way to make it very nice and modular and make everything very, very, compatible with each other. So there was different sizing and all that. Okay. So that was part of the dream. And it was like the dream was describing this to me, and I could see the layouts of the components and how it all worked. And they would be built with 3D printers using recyclable organic material or reclaimable materials like plastic bottles from the ocean, or hemp substrates, bamboo substrates. Um, so things like that. And that started me on the process of thinking, okay, well, that's how we get off of the digital frontier and get back into a more organic physical society. Is, if we had 500,000 people in a large, area that all had their own little hydroponic and aquaponic systems, and they were all growing different things, then you could have this organic community of people that could get together like a farmer's market every couple of weeks and barter their goods. And that completely takes the central bankers out of the equation. It produces harmoniousness of community, and everyone's communicating and everyone is finding value in the time that they've invested in making these products, whatever it may be, whether it's fish, whether it's having chickens and having organic eggs that are free range. And so it really opens up a lot of possibilities. So that was one dream, and that was a few years ago. And I've also thought about shipping container buildings, which, there's plenty of those laying around. You can get them cheap. You can make very interesting dwellings out of them. So those have been floating in my head for a while. And just, I think it was this last weekend, last Sunday morning, I had a dream about 6:03. I wake up from it and I couldn't sleep anymore. I had to walk out into the living room and write it all down and start planning it. And what it was I saw an urban landscape, and it was giant pyramids. Wow, that's interesting, because it's like Blade Runner kind of looking. Some of the cityscape was a little dark and ominous, but here's these wonderful pyramids rising up from there that look just beautiful, right? And as I'm flying in towards this pyramid, we enter the entranceway of the pyramid, which is, the pyramid's about 1,000 feet, so it's a large entranceway, a large archway. And as you walk in, you notice that there's a cube structure inside the interior of this hollow pyramid. You walk further on through another set of arches, and you're inside of a hollow cube structure. And then there's a giant sphere in the center of that. So everything's very geometric. The sphere is actually a fountain. So there's water that's being reclaimed that's running down the pyramid, down into reclamation centers, and then it's being filtered and pumped back up through the sphere into the top, which runs down the outside. It acts like a natural cooling mechanism. It provides humidity to the landscape inside of the pyramid and inside the cube structure, which the cube itself is made of multiple shipping containers that have been stacked, 2 and 3 thick. And probably to get that 1,000 feet, I mean, you have a lot of them. They're all interlocking, and each 4 corner there's elevators going up to have access to the floors. You could have about maybe 500, maybe 1,000 families that could live inside of those structures. The top of the pyramid, where there's hollowed out space, you could have the administrative spaces. You could have spaces for large hydroponic and aquaponic growing systems. So that water would all be filtered throughout the whole system and reclamated. So you're talking about a nice geometric structure that would probably also resonate harmonically. You're talking about a living situation where you have communal living, but of course, hopefully without the communist label or the fascist going on. It's just a nice organic landscape for families to create things, including the aquaponic, hydroponic, having farmers market, having open park areas where you could have live music inside the structure. And it's all very self-contained. And I didn't add this part. The pyramid is actually made of prefabricated bricks and structure pieces made out of either, like I said, the hemp substrate or the organic bamboo substrate, which can be grown in 3 or 4 months and harvested and turned into the materials for the building. So that was, and I wrote all this description down, and that's what I want to work for. I want to start writing for grants. There's money available for the most ludicrous things I've ever heard about in my life. When you look at the way the universities are filtering and laundering money from the taxpayers and just wasting it. I'm tired of hearing about wasted taxpayer money. So I'm going to live in this society, and I'm going to labor, and I'm going to pay some sort of government bureaucrat for services that I'm not getting. And maybe I need to check myself into that grant structure and get myself some of that money. And instead of wasting it, I'm going to do wonderful things with it if given the opportunity.
Well, hopefully you can break into that very small, closed circle. I was never able to crack that nut myself.
Yeah.
They have a very effective means of excluding you without really telling you that you're not going to get anything. You just kind of keep you on the hook, but you're not.
Well, maybe I'll wear a gray hat when I come in.
You will, but
I'm sure they saw you coming a mile away because you had a glowing white hat on. You're a white hat wizard.
Yeah,
they saw you coming.
Yeah, I had exposed myself pretty early on, and they realized that I was trouble without getting into detail.
Oh boy, yeah.
I was looking at something self-funding in terms of building businesses within institutions. It's called intrapreneuring, right? Mm-hmm. You've heard that concept. You join a company or an institution, and within that, you build something that's partly your company's and partly yours. I've tried that in any number of circumstances, but I'll tell you, that's what they're most vigilant of. People who are burrowing in there and exercising initiative and imagination that does not conform with their totalitarian constructs, which takes us back to the top.
The truth bringers can't hide for long in that kind of environment.
No, but you know what? You're in the format where you can break out of it. You can buy some amps, guitars, microphones, PAs. It's going to cost some money. And of course, vehicles, gasoline, and all that. But you can still gig. Until recently. They even tried to take that away, didn't they? Gigging.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's even one of the best places we played, they let us play for 3 1-hour sets. So we got a lot of material out. They were always very nice to us, gave us, free beer and even a little bit of money every once in a while, a little bit of walking around change for our goods and services type thing. Mm-hmm. But Winston's in Ocean Beach, one of my favorite places to play, a great stage, all that. They have now closed temporarily due to the COVID-19. I don't know if it's restrictions. I don't know if it's the lack of business, probably a combination of that, but just another slap in the face to the musical community of the state of California, the United States, and the world too. There's a lot of European bands that love to tour the United States, and that's how they're paying their mortgages and putting their kids through school. And was going pretty dang good for a lot of people up until this thing came down. So,
well, there was a feature article in the Rolling Stone, I think it was last week or so, talking about how this so-called COVID lockdown has thrown out places like Winston's. They've all closed down across the country. Now they're pretending like they're sad about it. I think Rolling Stone, here's where your conspiracy comes in.
mm-hmm.
I think they're in on it. Rolling Stone was started as a counterculture publication. Now it's a globalist publication. I don't know if you read it. I don't really.
I don't. Maybe maybe as a kid, having a radio disc jockey as a mom, we didn't have Better Homes and Gardens on the coffee table. It was Rolling Stone usually, or Janis Joplin's autobiography, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think you're right, and I've actually heard some rumblings that there's some money people in the music industry that are trying to move in under the auspices of being generous and wanting to help. But what a lot of people are already sniffing out is that they're dangling that golden carrot in front of these venue owners that are desperate for the help. They want to take any help they can get. But what is going to end up happening is these people are going to own shares of those businesses. So they will have a say and a sway over how those, even the independent, down to the, I don't know how small they want to get, right? And then of course, then you're going to have, ticket agencies that are going to move in and charge fees. So everybody's skimming off the top of already a pretty small, bit of coinage for the local musician.
Yeah. Well, you know about the pay to play. That's where the phrase originated, with bands that have to pay to perform.
Yeah, I've run across that most of my musical career, especially in California, Los Angeles, Orange County, and even down to San Diego. And yeah, I don't do it, and I'm right up front with that. I say, hey, we'll play for free, but I'm not going to take, all my guys are working class guys. We all have families, we all have jobs, we all rehearse. So you want me to drive 2 hours, bring, $10,000 worth of music equipment down to your little club, and furthermore, try to sell 50 tickets at $10 a piece, so we don't have to pay your sound guy when we get there? It's just like, come on now, seriously. But I'm off my soapbox on that now. I know these guys. Everybody needs to make a living. I understand that, but
no, I want to hear about that, because that is really the basis of the American economy, isn't it? These smaller operations and now you're telling me that they're even trying to nail that down. See, I hadn't heard that there's people going around dangling money in front of these desperate venues.
I would have to, and I may have to do some research on that, but I know that I read something very recently that was a post that was talking about someone from a large company that had, lots and lots of money, of course. And I don't even know if it was something like a Live Nation or a Ticketmaster or something like that.
That would make sense.
They were, one of the CEOs was saying, hey, we really need to help these, small venues out. And of course, the venues do need some help. But I'm not sure, sometimes you make a deal with the devil and you're going to dance to his tune. And
well, you bring up something that I observed about 10, 15 years ago. And of course, it's always in the guise of helping out, right? And the concept was microloans. Be careful of that phrase, microloans. They're going to give it to poor people. They've tested out in places like India villages. They give them to women. And you know what's next, right? Then they own it. They got you all wrapped up.
And they say, you've got too many children. We might need to. And they say, well, you've got too many children now. We need to put you on some sort of sterilant, or maybe your children need mandatory vaccines because you agreed to take that money, didn't you? Well, you didn't read the fine print. Yeah. So it's always nefarious. I've never trusted the
That
free
model
lunch
might
concept.
happen here in the US. They've tested it in the
Uh,
so-called third world. We have a ton of people who are marginally employed now or have
yeah.
lost their
Oh, they're
job.
ripe. They're ripe
They're
for the
ripe for
pickings.
the microloan plucking.
They're ripe for the pickings, and that's that's the ultimate dark winter that's coming. It's a dark, humorous, non-comedy type situation in which
Yeah.
a lot of desperate people that have been waiting for that second or third $1,200 check in what,
Mhm.
8, 9 months, just keep dangling that carrot, and then the next time it comes, you'll never know. On your tax form, they might slip something in there. It says, hey, well, you accepted that check, right? Well, what you didn't understand is that was some sort of a contractual agreement. When you
Mhm.
cashed that check, what you did is you signed away your rights as well to
Mhm.
certain things. And if you want to keep getting these checks, you need to agree with what we're putting down. So we're talking mandatory vaccine. We're talking get your little wristy thing or something,
Mhm.
and wear your mask when you go to the store. And if you get a couple of checks on your social credit score, then no more $1,200 check, citizen. You know,
The first person
that's,
to issue one of those checks was President Donald J. Trump.
yeah, yeah.
So
That's kind of why I
he's
said
not,
it almost doesn't matter who wins the election. It's almost how we react to whatever new administration is coming at us, because they're going to come at us. So I think
well,
we
you
need
bring
to
up
we
a
need
good
to start
point.
resonating and bringing our resonant levels up and be, we talked about indigo children. We need to be indigo patriots, and all of us together collectively start, you know,
Mhm.
bringing that level up and getting ready for what's next, and being very, very clear of thought, very clear of mind, and
Well,
have the heart to stand up for this republic and do
you
it
talk
together.
about how we react, right? We have all this vote recounting, and you're going to have all these lawsuits for the foreseeable future. I don't know how long it's going to last, but
Mm-hmm.
it's almost not even relevant.
The
I
law
think
sharks are going to get their snacks.
what's happening right now, I believe, is that there's a large scale social science testing of our reaction. We're being observed for
Mm-hmm.
how we are reacting. If we're aggressive about it, they might kind of pull back a little bit and wait a little bit later. But if we lay down and say, okay, we give
Mm.
up, we surrender, then
Sure.
okay, let's roll it out, the whole program. So I think it's a reaction time here. So do you have any suggestions on the reaction? I saw George Webb's, I guess it was a Twitter feed. He's going to go stick with the technologies, looking for the blackberries and
Sure.
trace all the networks and all that. That's one approach. Do you have a dream or an idea or a vision that
It
came to
it
you?
stays on that pathway, and what it is we need to start talking. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. We need to start getting in touch with our neighbors. We need to start talking to people that we think might be of the same opinion. And I think what this election has shown, and you see the Democrats, especially these little snowflakies, um, just melting down at the fact that they they learned something, that not everybody is just like them. Not everybody agrees Orange Man bad. What they're seeing now is that for every one person that says Orange Man bad, the person next to them is probably not in agreement. And they didn't understand that. So they've been bellowing to the, as loud as they can about this. And they thought everybody was on their side and had their back. And what they now understand is that's not true at all. That
Mhm.
it's really, unfortunately, kind of a 50-50 game. And that's when you take into consideration the fraud. And we know there's fraud. It's right there on its face. All we need to do is just, okay.
Mhm.
But we need to get over sometimes, things like the digital frontier, and we need to start getting more organic and just discussing these things face to face with other people, because that's what they don't want us to do. And myself, as the old punk rocker that I am, I love doing things that they don't want us to do.
Mhm.
And so that's what I look at. I look at, kind of like George Webb says, the metadata tells you things. And even when they don't tell you things, they're telling you things. It's a game. It's reading between the lines.
Mhm.
And so you see what they're kicking off. They're kicking George Webb off. They're trying to kick McDuff off. Why is that? It's because they're telling the truth, because they're over the target. So that's what we need to pay attention to. People like that, and then feed that organically if we have to do it like the people of old did, verbally, from person to person, and relay these things, so that when things are bad, you know what, you're going to get that knock on your door, and where that neighbor may have kind of looked at you a little funny when you brought something up the first time, when things start going bad and the stories start proving that you were probably right about that, you're going to get that knock on your door. And I think the best thing we can do is to embrace those situations and say, no, don't rub anybody's face in it. They don't need that. A lot of these folks were poorly educated by a system that was built to break them down ultimately and fail them. And what we need to be able to do is to be able to re-educate these folks in a more positive way and explain the lie to them effectively, hopefully, and succinctly, and be able to make them finally understand the lie that they've been fed, and the fact that we don't hate them for the fact that they believed that lie, that we're going to be more than happy to accept them into our flocks, if you will. And we all need to have some little flocks around, build small communities, and we can all depend on each other's specialties in the times of need.
Now, am I hearing you correctly in that you're saying we need to engage what was once considered the opposition, the fake opposition, right, pitted against us? Are we to be engaging them face to face? Is that what you're suggesting?
What I'm saying, and I think it's kind of what we're being shown on the media is, I think, mostly large cities where you have activist networks on both sides, right? So you've got these fringes on either end, and I don't want to be led around by the nose from a fringe of either direction necessarily. I want to be right here in the center where we can, as observers of what happened and people that understand how things were before. Like I said before, I remember the rotary telephone. I remember playing Pong. I remember riding my bike in the streets in the summertime with my friends in the neighborhood. I remember when things were different and we still had an idea of what a healthy republic was and what patriotism was, being proud of, 1976, the red, white, and blue, being proud of those things. Now, of course, since then I've had the wool pulled back from my face, and I understand the devious nature of the deep state, as you want to call it, and what they've done. But I still think there's hope for this republic, and I think that there's going to be a lot of people on the other side, if that's how you want to call it, right, that are waking up, and they're not those activists on the fringes that have the CNN cameras right up in their face all the time as they're blinding cops and throwing rocks and doing what they want to do. These are just normal people that have questions. And if we're there to supply that information to them in an honest way, in a level-headed way, in a reasonable way, and have those discussions, then I hope that we can start swaying some of their opinions our way. And like I said, they might not believe you the first time. Go easy with it. Don't smack them in the face with your knowledge. You know what I mean? But just go easy and be nice, and you might, like I said, get that knock on your door, and there you go. Then you got another person in your circle, in your small community that you can have and discuss things.
Well,
not on the internet, not with a text, not on the phone.
I'm glad to hear you say that. You're going beyond the meme meisters and just the chat rooms. And I think it's probably good. It's down to the fact that you're a live performing musician. You're out there in the community. That's your world. So here's an idea. How about approaching the management of Winston's and bringing these different groups together, and then having a hootenanny or sing along or just a jam, whatever it is, and then you can talk, because this is how people historically have made peace with each other. They dance and they sing and they whatever, they engage in communal activity. You're just the person to bridge that. And then of course
I can honestly say that not during or after any one of my performances has anybody come up to me and said, wow, you guys were really good. By the way, what's your political affiliation? So yeah, and here's the other trick that I've learned lately is when you start talking about something and you might even get a little bit too deep and somebody's looking at you a little funny, you just go, I heard it on the Joe Rogan podcast. You just get away with it, right? Because
Uh-huh.
you know what does he do? He's smoking blunts and drinking whiskey with Elon Musk, and
Yeah.
he can talk about whatever the hell he wants to talk about. And you know, well,
Yeah.
God bless him for that. You know what I'm saying? But I think it's funny because it almost it has a little mental spin on it. It's almost like a Jedi mind trick. You say these are not the droids you're looking for. And if somebody goes,
No,
"Where the hell did you hear that?"
yeah. Let's talk about indie media, because we talk about the other side most of the time. Today,
Yeah.
I want to spend time mea culpa. What have we done wrong? Our side, quote unquote, just for the sake of convenience.
Wow.
What about Joe Rogan? I mean, he's moved to Austin and he's kind of had an awakening,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
is he really taking us in a direction where we want to go? Smoke dope, watch WWF,
Yeah.
and listen to a bunch of muscle heads,
Sure. And
half stone people, visionaries, perhaps Elon Musk. Alex Jones was there like a short time ago. I really don't find that either
it's an
interesting or
interesting
even
club. Yeah.
entertaining. I just find it kind of pathetic.
Well, it is. I think it's meant to be more entertainment. It's almost like infotainment.
Yeah,
You know, I mean, maybe they're trying to put some things out there, and there may be a few little nuggets here and there, little, you know,
it's kind of
tiny little
sad.
rabbit holes and whatnot. But
It's
ultimately,
sad.
you're right. I mean,
It's
what are they really doing? I mean, think about how much time is spent. I mean, those guys both have thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of archived video and multiple channels and platforms,
Mhm.
which ultimately kind of makes you think, gee, if somebody like McDuff or George Webb can get booted off, you know, with X amount of followers, right?
Mhm.
Why is Joe Rogan still allowed on there? Why, you know, if they really wanted to take Alex Jones out, why don't they just take him out, right? Take him off and get the URL out of there, SWAT team him, you know, get the feds out there with the SWAT team and whatnot. And
Yeah.
I think they're limited hangouts in their own way. They're not very limited. They've been around quite a while and they've got a lot of success. But maybe
Sure.
they're there for a reason, and
Yeah.
for the
You know,
infotainment for the folks, the bread
Monday
and the
through
circus.
Friday, just in the Alex Jones show itself, not to mention Owen Schreiker and the other people that are there.
Mm-hmm.
If you watch the whole lineup for the InfoWars, you can be sitting on your couch for 5 or 6 hours straight.
Yeah, it's just as bad as someone who has a big widescreen TV on one side of their wall and just blast CNN at their face 16 hours a day. Unfortunately, that's my father, and he's
Oh, that's a lot of people
I
out there,
I
but
can't I can't talk about much with my dad. We just kind of nod and smile. And
well,
I feel bad because he's an amazing man, and he's an intelligent human being, and he's reasonable, and I don't think I could discuss some of the things that you and me discuss with him, and that's unfortunate. So
however,
yeah.
there is a song in there, right?
Hopefully so. Yeah, I can write
Yeah,
it. I think
he-
it's an acoustic little ditty, and it goes
he's
a
an
little
archetype.
something like that.
He's
Now,
an
he's a great
archetype.
guitar player,
Yeah,
and
I
I think
mean,
we still communicate through music, and I think that's fine. We have
sitting
our healthy way of communication that doesn't involve politics.
sitting in front of the 40-inch HD watching CNN for hours on end, or pick your indie channel, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
The net result is the same, and that's why it really gladdens my heart for you to be saying, "Yeah, talk to your neighbor.
We need to get out
Let's
in the
do a
park
face
and
to
have
face
barbecues and stuff. You know, it's
barbecue, garden together, do
yeah,
some playing on a community level," and that's basic Americana. That was one generation ago, maybe half a generation. We used to
yeah.
do that. I mean, I remember that.
Organic, just a guy with an acoustic guitar and a kid with a set of bongos, man, and you could just sit in an alleyway and jam out, and you'd have a crowd,
Go to the
and
beach.
that
Go to
was
the
so
theater.
beautiful, you know.
Yeah.
People you don't know will just walk up to you and interact, and you have conversation, you have discussion right there, you have a communal sort of a reference with music.
Well, Brian, help me out on a generational level. How do you get through the post-millennial people who have no memory of that except in some movie or television show they saw, and are really locked into uh, their phones or what their devices, whatever it
Yeah,
is? Because
yeah.
you're a young guy, especially me, will come off as a geezer, not Geezer Butler, but a geezer,
One
like
could only be
passe.
so lucky to be Geezer Butler, right? But
Yeah,
no,
Greta
and to tell you the
Thunberg.
truth, I mean, what I'm doing, where I work 50 almost 50 hours a week sometime restoring the old cars like we've talked about, and that's a butt kicker right there, just getting home when it's dark and then still realizing you got to work on some music or do a little research on this and that, and then I'm kind of the cook here, so I'm just constantly running. So to tell you the truth, and especially now that everything's closed anyway, the social interaction out in our community is very limited.
Mm.
So my chance to get out there and interact with, like you're saying, that younger crowd, just it's just not there right now. And unfortunately, when you take a gamer kid who's been hanging out in mom's basement, slamming Mountain Dew and playing PS, 39 or whatever these kids are playing these days,
Yeah.
right? Chances are that COVID hasn't made them any more social. They probably aren't really wanting to climb out of the basement more than they did 8 or 9 months ago. They're still there, and they're probably in worse shape than ever, and they're probably more isolated and lonely than ever, which is really unfortunate. That's an unfortunate side effect of this fake pandemic that they're springing on us, is that a generation of children will be traumatized for the rest of their lives, and they're going to be thinking about wearing that damn mask.
Mm-hmm.
Where did my Christmas go? Where did my Thanksgiving go? Where did my grandma?
Would you write a song about that? I think you're onto something here.
Hey, there's
This is
always
like
room.
Tommy. This is Tommy or Quadrophenia 2020, isn't it?
Also, we have to be able to make people understand in the future what happened. And I
Yeah.
think albums can do that, because then maybe someday it comes back into the retro and the vinyl comes back into play, and somebody pulls a dusty vinyl off of the shelf and puts that needle to it and opens up and starts reading those lyrics, and they say, wow, you know what? This is what happened. This album is about what the government was doing to us back in 2020 when your mom was young during the
Yes.
COVID thing. Wow,
Right.
what a trip. Listen to this. See what they did here? They really screwed everybody over, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, maybe this is a way of archiving the modern day
Well, Brian,
historically for another generation. But then, of course, like I'm saying, it can have some power now, in the here and
oh,
in the now.
absolutely.
That
Yeah.
creation is going to be built
Now and
to
into the
have
future.
that power, and we'll move into the future. It's a time machine.
Yeah. Well, Brian, you have a heavy responsibility. I think you've just outlined what
Nice.
the subtext or the
Hey,
the the
this is
underground
my
purpose.
McDuff moment. This is my McDuff moment right
I
here.
believe so.
So
And
rally round your throne.
as we're heading up to the 60-minute mark here, why don't you leave us with your progress on your album then? Because that's going to be your message in the bottle.
Well, I haven't had a whole bunch of time to work on it, as we had a really nice rehearsal last week with Into the Void. But I have been able to get all the hardware pieces all situated together, make sure they're working in synchronous, if you will. And so I've also gotten these old Korg Electribe series electronic processors out of their closet. Had them sitting in a nice padded bag for a while. They're from probably the year 2000. So they're
I have
pretty
an
old pieces
old
of equipment. They're
I have an
nice.
old Roland groove box myself.
Yeah.
Tell me
Yeah. So
about your
I'm
new
getting ready to,
DAW.
what's that? Oh, the
Tell,
DAW. It's
yeah.
actually, it's just a mono input. I think it's actually got a stereo input, but it's got the universal input where it'll take a 1/4-inch jack, mono or stereo, and also an XLR connector for a single microphone. A lot of people use it for podcasting. I'm going to use it to lay just scratch vocals in there after I lay the beats out using the chord processors.
Mm-hmm. And what's the brand? Is that a UA or?
So that'll make the scratch tracks so they don't have the beats down. I'll have the vocals down, and I can roll right down in there with a guitar track and a basic bass track, and I'll have the basic structure down and start practicing with the boys.
And you're recording into what, Pro Tools?
I'm actually using Adobe software. It's called Adobe Audition, and it's part
Okay.
of their bundle. So when you go and you get Photoshop now, or you want to get InDesign or any of the other Adobe products, which there's a multitude of course, they're going to have video editing, photo editing. And I said, well, they got to have audio editing too. Sure, there it is. So for 20 a month, you avoid having to buy a super expensive DAW with built-in hardware and all the other stuff that goes with it, where you have to install the drivers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This was actually very, very intuitive and user-friendly. And I can't wait to use it. It's going to be a fun experience.
And with Adobe Audition, can I make films out of it with it too?
You can edit films, and I believe you can also edit video in Photoshop, which I didn't know. I'd done some video editing in Photoshop.
Okay.
It's just one of those little preferences that you click down into and you go, oh my God, video editing, boom. And it's very easy and intuitive, just like some normal recording software where you can drag and drop the files and the clips around, and then you can program audio or video fade ins and fade outs, or different effects, and also put in still images as well. Good. And do overdubs if you want to on top of that. So things are, you could lose a lot of hours in the editing day. I was here in George and oh God, is that
Peter Duke?
Peter Duke. Yeah, you can. I understand what Peter's talking about. You can lose a whole day.
Yeah.
And usually the only thing to let you know how long you've been in there is when your butt goes numb and it's time to move.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for indulging us, allowing us to nerd out about hardware, because it's very important. We need the tools in order to realize these dreams that you were laying out there. So thank you for sharing that, because I'm going to get into Adobe, what is it?
Adobe Audition will do that. That'll do the audio and video, but then Photoshop, if you've got access to Photoshop, will also do that. And they're pretty affordable. It's like a monthly rental, basically.
$20 a month.
$20 a month. It's a robust system. Yes.
There you go. And this is how we break down the hegemony of Netflix and iTunes.
That's right. The technology is right there at our fingertips, folks. All you got to do is stop watching other people talk about it and start talking about it amongst yourselves. Take the power back, folks. It's all about that.
Let's end on that note. Brian, thank you very much.
That's right, sir. It's about time for me to go feed them kitties.
All righty. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Sir.